So my wife and I, at the beginning of 2019, we were struggling to find a way to keep track of our hours, and we were starting to feel that it was more important that we do. We tried various phone apps. Most of them we had issues getting the reports out. So what I thought was, why don't we just write the reports kind of as we do our clocking in and out? So we kind of came up with this format. Hopefully you'll see it's relatively straightforward. We did make a thing for setting the year. Hopefully I'll be able to use that to set other things later, but for now it only does setting the year. So you can write the date a little bit shorter if it's been set. And then the name of a job will start with the name of the job, and then it's just be within commas or spaces or new lines, right? And then the clock in and the clock out can look like this, with a dash in between to say it's 1. Or if you just want to clock in, don't bother with the dash. And when you clock into the next thing, that will treat that as a clock out for the last. The whole thing kind of worked in my mind on principle. So if I set, you can also set tags using this. So tag 1 like this, and this would maybe be I was tired, or I don't know what the tags would do, but we needed to keep some kind of tag tracking thing. So I thought, well, we do this with tags, and then that tag will apply to everything until you see some kind of clear tags marker. So it's a relatively straightforward file format. I didn't want to make it too complicated because my wife doesn't want to be doing a load of complicated. So we got the file format. I needed to write a parser, and it was trickier than I expected to distinguish each of these parts. I brought in the strings, and I had to tell whether they were a number or code, tokenize it, as it were. And I think Rust is still quite a nice language for doing this. The matching, the parsing like that, I was quite impressed overall, but sometimes I still got quite nastily nested a little bit too deep for my liking. And so I did manage to get it working, and I thought there's got to be a better way. Way back at university we did grammar-based parsing in C. I thought there's got to be some kind of system like that in Rust. And yeah, there is, and it's really nice. Enter Pest. So this is really what I want to talk about today. I got the system working with Pest, and I found that actually it was way more flexible than it had been before I tried doing it with Pest. So I'm going to show you a bit about kind of what the grammar system looks like and how it makes it work. So we'll start with the grammar. So you just stick it in your source file, something.pest, and this is kind of looks like standard grammars, right? From what I remember from university. I haven't used them properly for so long, and I really am glad that I'm going to start using them again. This is so the file to me looks like it has a start of an input, and then it's any number of commas or new lines. If there's nothing in between them, then that's fine. And so actually that wiggly brace here says and then, and if you've got a star, that's any number of them with white space in between them allowed, assuming you've defined this white space rule here. And for me, a white space is either a space or a tab. So any number of these, and then a record, and between these two braces can be repeated any number of times. And then to the end of the file we can also have any number of new lines and commas, and then the end of the file. So basically we're just looking at records, and a record is either a clock in and out, or it's a time, which is basically a clock in without a dash, a clock out, which is a time with a dash in front of it, a date, the setter, I used that for getting the year, clear tags was a pair of underscores, and a tag was any new tag item, and then of course the job, which is just plain string. So define the job, it's either in quotes or it's just a word which has no spaces. So if you've not put it in quotes, you're not allowed a space. And a tag was an underscore. This dollar here was kind of helpful. If you put that dollar on the outside of the squiggly braces, highlighted now, then that says the and then tilde doesn't allow for any spaces. If you didn't have that dollar, it would allow whatever you've defined white space to be. The other thing we've got here is an underscore on the outside says just don't put this in the tree, right? Don't care about it. Just make sure it's there, but don't put it in the tree. So the comments are the same. Don't put them in the tree. And these are two keywords that Pest actually cares about, and it uses them on the tilde, unless you've put the white space thing, unless you've put this dollar sign. So here we go. A word is a letter or a number, at least one of them. So the plus is at least one, the star is 0 to many. So here we've got a word and then a space and then a word. So one word is words or many words. And the last thing to note is that the order does matter. So inside these two brackets here, it's a choice of, it could be any of these things. So a record is any of, a clock IO, a time, a clock out. And this was so much easier actually than the other system, because it would just try it and fail, and if it failed, you just got the next thing, and it would tell you what you got out. Here's the magic file. It's really basic to import, right? So you just import it in your cargo, and there you go, Pest and Pest derive. That's it. That was how to get Pest working. So easy. Alongside, I needed the pair to get access to, and all of Pest derive to do its thing. And then these three lines here, you're deriving a parser, the grammar is this file, and there's my struct. That alone creates your parser. So everything else in this file is just, well, I just created another trait of my own to make things usable from Pest, so you could create a new one. But this, the main reason I did create this was to get me this from Pest op thing, so I could pass it an option and not worry, because there's an awful lot of unwrapping inside parsing code, right? There are errors everywhere, right? If you're dealing with a string that someone has sent you, you need to make sure that this actually does apply and is correct. Some of that can't be quite as type safe as you would hope. All that Pest will give you back if you ask for it is an and str between the start and finish, and you will then have to pass it into whatever else you want. So you've managed to find the bit that is just the digits, but you actually have to convert these digits into an int, right? So I did actually make this trait work for anything that was a num. So yeah, as long as your thing was a num and had from str, then I gave it a rule that said, hey, try and parse it, right? And so it says, so you're given a pair, which is the Pest type, basically. It's a pair of rule, and rule is defined in this crate, but you'll not find it anywhere in this crate, right? This is a pesto rule. The file we're in is pesto.rs. So rule is a pesto rule, and it exists because of the macros that work on this. And that's just an enum, which is really cool. Basically, for every single element of this page, there is an enum. So the rule enum has the variance of whitespace, comment, num, string inner, char, word, words, etc. So then we can just compare on them. So if the rule is a num or a plus num, then we should be able to pass it as an integer. I've put a question mark here. Realistically, we should be able to just unwrap it, but I prefer to pass back the error if there is one. It shouldn't fail, right? But that's dependent on me getting the grammar right. So if there was a problem, we should be able to get that error back somehow. Perhaps the thing to do there is to expect and then say, hold on a second, how on earth did you get a plus num with an unpassable number, right? A plus num, according to the grammar, is at least one ASCII digit. And actually, you know, you can fail to pass that if it's a really long series of ASCII digits, which I think is why I went for question mark in the end, because and TOC error can handle from parseInt error. So oh, and that's how we know that is because we've required that, right? TOC error. So this is a requirement of this impl that TOC error can handle from T as from str. I'll be honest, I didn't write this code, I just copied and pasted it from the error and threw it in there. But it makes sense as I look at it what it's saying. The rest of this I wrote. But you can just pass for anything, right? So timefile.pass a rule of time. So this is my test code, just a couple of tests. I do understand what this does now. So this unwraps to an iterator so you can get a next, and so now of course you're pretty sure you're going to get at least one element if this didn't fail, right? This could fail if it failed to pass, but if it didn't fail to pass, you've got an iterator and it's going to have at least one element, which is the string. So we know that that's going to be there. So probably should change this code to accepted past a time that wasn't empty. Yeah, that could possibly fail if your grammar could have an empty result. So the next challenge really was trying to get everything out of that into what I thought it should look like. And in my mind, this is just a list of jobs, and that list of jobs is an enum. So here's the enum. It's a set of clock actions, so we can add a tag, we can clear the tags, and if there are extra tags we can put new ones in. We set an in, we set an out, we set an in and an out. We set the job, set the date, or set the num. So basically I wanted to be able to break this in, so I actually had to implement the pestable for clock action. And so you just assumed you would get a rule, and depending on what that rule is, you would be able to read the rest of it. And by using the from pesto thing, so stime, which is a really, really basic time element. It's stored as an int, and it's basically minutes and hours, because I just wanted minutes and hours for clock in and out. From any pesto rule, I could build an enum variant that matched it. Now we got a date here. Well, that's a little bit of work to do, because so we read so when you go into inner, you get an iterator through the children of date. So a date is here, a positive int, and then a forward slash, and then a positive int, and then possibly one more forward slash positive int, which will be the year. So here, when we call into inner, we get an iterator which could have what we know it's going to have at least two elements, but it may have a third. So the day and the month have to be positive. The year is an integer because you can have negative years, and that's how Chrono handles it. And if there was nothing there, we just put the option of none in the date, because the date action could have a none option in that final part. And so we're able to just build a bunch of rules with relative ease of the actions. And once we got the actions, we could just handle them the standard way. And at this point, you're not really parsing anymore. You've got a list of actions to do. There were a couple of things in my original grammar that changed as I put it into Pest. When I say my original grammar, I don't really mean I had a grammar as such. It was horrible code. But when I put it in Pest, it became a lot easier to adjust and tweak. So the biggest example of that is in num setter, which originally had to be an equals, then the thing I'm setting, then a colon, then the number. So that here is this equals year 2019. Set the year to 2019. And that is defined here between these brackets. So it's equals and then a word, then a colon, and then a number. And I've allowed white space in this, which I'm surprised by, but that's okay. But here's the thing that made it more flexible, was just in this grammar, I was able to add this option, which I was never going to have been able to do with my manual system. Because I was just like, well, if the first character is an equals, we'll treat this as a setter, right? And do it that way. Right, because otherwise there would have been a ton of backtracking in the manual work that was really awkward. But here, right, now I can have word equals num, and that's a setter. And from my reading perspective, you know, when you call into inner on the num setter pair, you're going to get a word and then a num. Doesn't matter which one of these is actually written down, you're going to get a word, then a num. Or in this one, you're going to get a word, then a num, which means I didn't even need to have different Rust code to handle these two cases. It just worked. So that was really nice. So much easier to read. Even as I'm describing it to you, I feel like there's nothing to describe. Or as if I was showing you my manually written code to parse this stuff. My goodness, would I have a headache trying to break it all down. So yeah, hopefully this is a brief introduction to Pest, why I think you might want to use it, why I'm definitely going to use it for the next thing I have to parse in future. So now this is working, I'll show you basically how work talk works, right? So if I do dash day and then a dash, it tells me I have been working on this YouTube video for an hour and 35 minutes. That's all I've done today. Or I can look up my week, and that's this week. It can tell me all the things I've been working on this week. There's a bunch of other stuff. It'll print the lot out. And I can actually clock out, right? Work talk dash out, and if I just put a dash, that's now I've just clocked out. So if I am at the end there, it says I clocked out at 11:43. Didn't really want to, so I'll just delete that. And basically I just made it only ever append to the end of the file. I didn't want to make any weird things happen. But I can do the same. I can work talk dash in pest promo, because that's what I've been doing. Oh, not out in. And again, there it is. It's added an entry for me to clock in to Pest promo. Date because the date has been set and the date is today. It does actually check that when it goes to write. It will go, is the date the same today? So I don't need to really work very hard to do my clock ins and outs, but if I have made a mistake, you know, correcting it is pretty straightforward. Whereas correcting the mistakes in the apps that I was using is kind of tricky. So if you kind of like the look of this app, I'm kind of building it together with my wife, who is testing it as from the perspective of someone who absolutely hates to use the terminal. We kind of it should get more usable over the coming months, but currently it is what I am using. So go for that. Feel free to like and subscribe. Try out the work time. Try out Pest. And that's it. See you anon. Oh, and I'm doing another series for Pact again. I've done 2 now. The last one was a Rust 101 kind of course. I might put a link in the description. And I think I'm going to be doing one where it's more ecosystem based, so introducing different parts of the ecosystem through a more through building some projects together. I'll let you know how that one goes. So I may not be YouTubing too much in the near future, but like and subscribe and you'll find out when I do post something in the future. See you anon.